Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Leadership Loft with Lakeisha C. Brooks. And I am your host, Lakeisha C. Brooks. And just like last time, I'm super excited about this interview as well. So I'm just going to put it out there. So, this fabulous young lady is my cousin. Okay. So, Dr. Jennifer Mitchell, and she's going to be talking to us about accessibility, architecture. I mean, if you all need the go to person for this, she is the go to person. And I don't just say that because she's my little cousin, but only like 5 months. But I say that because she is just doing the damn thing. And I cannot be more proud of her and the work she's doing. And just like we saw with our previous guest, Jamin, she is also going to be one of our presenters for the Diversity Blueprint 2024 in August. So if you want to know more about accessibility, you want to hear a great case study about that, I'm going to tell you, this woman has a lot of case studies. I mean, she's phenomenal. Make sure that you check out the Diversity Blueprint. And I've already dropped the link to that. So if you're interested in getting tickets, only $99. Go ahead and check that out. So before we dive into this interview, I kind of gave a little bit of introduction to Dr. J. Oh, we already have someone. Hey, Christy, how are you? Welcome. Yes. So tell us a little bit about yourself, Dr. Mitchell. I'm going to call you Jen. I have to.
Just call me
I'm
Jen.
going to call
Yes.
you Jen. So tell us a little bit about you, your background, how you got into this field.
Yeah. So a little bit about me. I grew up in South Georgia. Like Lakeisha said, we're cousins. So I'm excited to be here with my big cousin by 5 months to just share this space with her. I received my doctoral degree from the University of Georgia. So go dogs out there, all my bulldogs. But I worked at Florida State University for about 8 years in disability services. And so while I was there, I oversaw all accessibility needs for all students, whether you're undergrad, grad, med school, law school. And so I got really, really involved in that work and just found that that was my passion, working with our students with disabilities and making our campus accessible for all. And so with that, I have taken what I've learned and what I did at Florida State, and I'm now at Philadelphia College of Osteopathic Medicine, where I oversee diversity and community relations, and I've been able to kind of implement what I did at Florida State here with some medical humanities courses where we do disability justice in medicine and things like that. I'm a mom of three beautiful, wonderful, lovely kids. I have twin boys. They will be 12 next month, sixth grade.
Wow.
I know. They keep me busy with all the sports. And then I have a daughter. She'll be 11 in April. So I'm a busy mama on top of, the work that I do, which I love. It doesn't feel like work. So thank
Absolutely.
you for having me so much.
Absolutely. You can feel the passion that you have for
Mhm.
this in this space and diversity. And then, of course, being a busy mom. I mean, it's just so much that you do. You're like a super mom,
Mhm.
in everything that you do. So thank you so much for being here. So I just want to start off. Can you provide some insights into how accessibility encompasses consideration for all type of disabilities, and what's currently being addressed as it relates to diversity architecture, in your opinion?
Yeah. So I think when you look at all of disabilities, you want to include universal design, right? Because that's an approach that can be used for everyone, either if you have a disability or if you don't. So this approach really involves like designing that architecture, like we are talking about, environments and programs and services for everyone, right? And so, regardless of your disability, which there's diversity in disability, you will have access to those programs, those environments and those services. And then when you want to look at it from like a digital accessibility, because that's emerging, right? We're seeing a lot of that um, in the profession. So we want to make sure that our platforms are accessible, that there's social interaction, ensuring websites, application, those tools are accessible for disability. And especially in the United States, there are different laws that protect folks with disabilities that you have to kind of follow. And just the awareness and training. So what are we doing within the diversity architects, like as architects of diversity? What are we doing to bring that awareness awareness? What are we doing to train folks on accessibility or disability? How can we make those environments more inclusive so that everyone feels like they belong? How reducing stigma? There's actually stigma within the disability community as well. So, what are we doing to raise awareness and reduce that stigma within those areas? So, I think neurodiversity, another trend that I'm seeing is neurodiversity in the workplace. That is one area that I know with my institution, we're working on doing some training around. And I see a lot of different organizations being really, really conscious about that and what that looks like. And so that recognition of neurodiversity as an asset in the workplace, I think there's a value added. And so having organizations really take a look at it from that lens instead of a deficit lens. And so adopting those hiring processes to include folks who are neurodiverse, making the environment feel inclusive so that folks who are neurodiverse feel comfortable enough to be who they are. So I know those are some ones that are kind of emerging as well.
Absolutely. And I love how you said that we have to see the advantages.
Mhm.
A lot of times, the stigma with those with disabilities is a negative. It's such a negative stigma associated with that, but we have to see that there's a uniqueness in all of us, right? And
Right.
understanding that. But it starts with what you said, education and training. Some
Mhm.
people don't know that. We don't know what we don't know as well. And what I love that you talked about is that there's diversity within disability. A
Mhm.
lot of times people lump them all together. Oh, you have a disability, you're in this category together.
Mhm.
Can you speak to a little bit more about the diversity and the disability realm, and then maybe talk to some of those different areas that people may not know about when it comes to disability and diversity?
Yeah, so there are many different types of disabilities, right? And so when we're looking at the diversity within the disability, there's not a one size fits all, right? So oftentimes, like you said, exactly what you're talking about, there's a category, and everyone who falls in that category, everyone thinks that they're the same, and that's not the case. So when you're in the workplace, when you're in organizations, when you're in academia, it's really important to educate yourself on the diversity within the disability. For example, when I was at Florida State, we categorized folks, right, just based on disability, but everyone came in with uniqueness as far as what their needs were. So a person with ADHD can have the same diagnosis, but two separate needs, like their needs can be totally different. And so you have to understand that that's going to look different in the deaf community, right? There's diversity within in that community. There's some folks within the deaf community really live and breathe by ASL, and some are just like, no, cochlear implants is the whole thing. And it's so it just depends. And so you have to understand that just because you have a disability, that you're not, everyone's not the same. There's diversity there. And really appreciate and value what a person can bring, whether or not they have a disability or not. So um I think also making sure, right, that as an organization you are addressing those needs,
Right.
right, and that you're not trying to address the needs just based on the category, but the individual needs. And so at Florida State, if you came in getting accommodations, we did something called an interactive process where we assessed what are your needs, right? What's your story? What do you need? Because it's going to look different based on the person and the person's lived experience, right? We know that in DEI, that's just something that comes along with it. And so being aware of that is, I think, the most important piece for people to just know.
Wow. I love that, that interactive approach to it.
Mhm.
I think a lot of times when we think about diversity, whether it's race, gender, whatnot, people think that we're like a monolithic group of folks. We're not a monolith. We are very different in different things we do, just like every person African American is not the same. The
That's
journey's
right.
not the same. The story's not the same. Though
Yeah.
we always lump them in together. So I love to hear that you're like, when we come in, when they came in Florida State, we did an individualized assessment to
Mhm.
determine their needs, because just because someone has ADHD or they're diagnosed with that doesn't mean the next person has the same needs because they have the same diagnosis. That's wonderful.
Yeah.
And so, I wanted to talk a little bit about a program that you implemented, and you spoke so beautifully about the Florida State program. Did you implement that process? Can you talk a little bit about that? Because I just find that so
Yeah.
interesting that you're just like, hey, it's individualized approach, it's interactive. Can
Mhm.
you share a little bit more about that, maybe for organizations or schools that are interested in that type of approach as well?
Yeah. So at Florida State, we went from kind of at first we were more of a legal, right, kind of compliance. We wanted to just
Yeah.
make sure that we were meeting the mark with that, which is okay because that's the foundation, especially with the laws that protect folks with disabilities. But we wanted to take it to more of that universal design. We wanted it to feel like you belong when you came to Florida State, from regardless if you had your disability or not. And so when students would come sign up for services with us, I did implement a more of that interactive individual approach. And what I would tell all of my staff was the student that's coming in know themselves more than anybody,
Right.
even from like reading the diagnosis and the documentation and all of that from the professionals, which was good to have, but you have to listen to their story, right? And based on their story, help, decide what would best be for the student in the environment of academia. So I definitely did a lot of work about that. I also did a lot of work around how can we make this environment here more proactive to reduce the need for accommodations, right? Because a lot of our students were coming in needing accommodations, but what can we do as an institution to make this environment very accessible for all students? And so we implemented a lot of different things in that area, a lot of education and awareness. I created a whole faculty ad hoc committee for just for disabilities. And we went through the faculty senate. And I had disability champions who were faculty, and that had really helped the environment, right? We're talking about environments and the design from a diversity architecture viewpoint, and that really helped it in the classroom when we had those champions placed throughout different colleges, who could talk to their colleagues about what they were doing, that were proactive for our students with disabilities. It really took off, and it made that environment inclusive for our students, and they felt heard, and they felt safe, and they felt a sense of belonging, which was the ultimate goal.
Wow. I heard some really good nuggets in there,
Yeah.
especially when you said we took a proactive approach and we moved the needle from being compliant, which is, like you said, is great. You need to make sure that you are quote unquote checking those boxes. But how do you move from that area to a different phase? And so now we're taking a more proactive approach. We're making sure things are accessible as well, so that people feel as though they're not just another number, they're not just another check in the box, but they really do feel like they're just like every other student at Florida State University, because they are just like every other. They're just as valued as the athlete that brings in a lot of money for the football team. They're
Right.
just as valuable as any other student. And so I just got chill bumps and goosebumps thinking about the work that you did at Florida State. And I'm sure you're doing the same thing at your current school as well. Of course, Christy said you're doing a great job. So
Oh,
of course, you're doing a great job. And thank you, Shanine, for
and
joining
she
us.
is too. Yes.
Thank you for all the work that you do. So let's talk about technology and innovation
Mm.
as well. What are some specific advances that you're seeing in the technology and innovation field for accessibilities that maybe you've done, or the organizations should be or can be doing to make sure things are more accessible?
I think it all goes back to currently, it's new and people are catching on, but AI is a thing right now, right?
Oh,
It's a thing. And it can play a significant role in like enhancing accessibility and improving your environment for people with disabilities. So I think really like researching and seeing how those digital spaces and AI can contribute to accessibility is important. When you think about assistive technology, so for example, there are screen readers or different like braille, speech to text type assistive technologies out there. AI has now provided a range of like different types of assistive technologies, right? So I think that is definitely on the merge and helping out. Learning and education, I think ensuring that again your websites, your anything digital is accessible. So we're doing, I'm working with ICF, and they're looking at some website, a braille reader. And so um, I had a colleague that's going to look at that for them. But that's important, right? Because if I
Mhm.
need to access information and I'm blind, right? And I use braille or I use a different technology. I need to ensure what's up, what's out there is accessible. um so I think really just leaning into that AI stuff. It's a lot out there. I think it's going to definitely advance a lot of what we're seeing with assistive technologies. Um, and so I think really that's the emerging part of what we're seeing now.
Great, great. So, how do we make organizations more aware of this? You talked about training, education, but how do we? What's the prerequisite before that? Because in order to have the education, you have to have the knowledge to say, "I need it." How do you get companies just aware that they need to go beyond? Okay, this is what I have to do for compliance. What are some things or some recommendations that you have done, you've seen that can make organizations aware that I have to move beyond checking a box?
Yeah, I think just ensuring. Um, so yeah, you're right. So it's that I think in America, right? It's the ADA. It's just really that checking the box part. Like
Yeah.
that's the foundation, right? Like as we've mentioned before, it's the foundation, ensuring that you're meeting the needs based on the protected status of folks with disabilities in the law. But that's only going so far, right? That's really not inclusion as we talk about. It's really not equity as we talk
Right.
about, because it's really just basic right. Think about it, like civil rights for folks of color, right? We
Right.
had to have a law to protect us to give us civil rights. It's the same thing,
Yeah.
right? But that only gave us rights. That didn't give us full access or
Oh, I love that. Say that again. Wow.
right.
Wow.
Yeah, it just gave us basic rights. It didn't give us full access. We didn't get the equities, we didn't get the inclusion piece.
Hmm.
So it's the same thing for folks with disabilities, right? That law is the great protection piece for just basic rights. But organizations, if you want to value your people that are in your organization, if you want to have high morale, if you want to see an ROI, right? You have to go beyond legal. You have to implement things that are inclusive. You have to implement things where folks feel as if they belong. And you got to look at it from the intersection as well, right? Disability doesn't discriminate
No, it does not. Mm.
at all, right? It doesn't matter your race, your gender, anything, right? It does not discriminate. And so organizations have to take that intersectional approach as well when you're thinking about implementing policy procedures, programs, initiatives, trainings for disability. You have to include that intersectional approach with just you just have to, because everyone is going to bring their unique experience based on those intersections of your identity. And so I think that is a good way to recognize those complex ways of those different aspects of identity and how it may impact the environment that they're in. And so, really paying attention to that. Organizations taking it beyond compliance. That's what I always say. We're beyond compliance, um, and doing the work. Include the voices, right, of the disability community, because they are the ones who are experiencing the different, things. And so if you're able to, I would have make sure that folks with disabilities have a seat at the table. If you're, now wanted to redesign, using that diversity architecture, because I think with disability, it would be a redesign. If you're already existing organization, you're gonna have to now redesign, right? If you're a new organization, you just design up front and you're good to go. Um, but how do you redesign your landscape, your organization to include accessibility architecture? And that includes having those who are advocates, who are allies, and folks with disabilities at the table to have those voices heard.
That's beautiful. And it's interesting that you talk about redesigning and change because in our diversity readiness tool that we just created at Brooks Consultants, we actually ask those questions under the readiness for change.
Mm,
We ask,
mhm,
are you ready to make those changes for accessibility as well? We
mhm,
ask that
mhm,
because, like you said, like if you are already an organization and you're doing it, are you really ready to make it's not just a mindset, it's sometimes monetary as well. You have
mhm.
to actually invest in some of these technologies and tools that you need to make sure that things are accessible for those with disabilities as well. And if you're like, no, I don't know, I mean, we're compliant, yeah, then you're not really ready for that change that it's going to take to do this work. So, have you ever encountered, whether somebody you were consulting and the work you've had, where people are just not ready for that change?
Mhm,
Where it was like an afterthought, like, oh, no, 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 we are compliant, we do ADA, and they're not really ready for the actual redesign, like you said.
mhm,
And if you've experienced that, how did you overcome that? What are some of the techniques that an organization or a champion like yourself could do to overcome organizations that are not ready for
mhm.
that redesign that you just talked about?
Yeah, I think that's it goes back to what we said earlier. You don't know what you don't know, right? And so oftentimes it's how you frame the benefit, right? And so when it was many spaces that I would go into, and there was resistance. They're like, "Girl, you're crazy. What you talking about? We're good. We don't need all of that." But I had to, one, learn the organization and see where they were with it. And then um, really the buy in was how this benefits your organization, right? How does it bring the value to it? And so that part, it can be challenging for those some, and some they're just like, oh yeah, I get that, that makes sense. But for those who have major resistance, what we do is we take a step-by-step approach, right? It may not be you're going to go straight in and you're going to implement all this new technology and new this and new that, but it just may be, hey, why don't we have a town hall and talk about some of the issues that you may see, or some of the wins, right? I like to highlight wins as well, because
Yeah.
many organizations are doing the work and they don't even realize that they're doing it. So like how do you highlight that? I think that helps also with the buy-in for different organizations too, to recognize, oh, we are doing it, so we can take it a step further. um, and just really, assessing the needs of each organization, but not to get organizations to be comfortable with being uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Oftentimes is kind of where I land. But recognizing there's diversity and disability is huge. And recognizing that it doesn't have to be a long, like a complete redesign from the beginning. There's steps in between that you could take to get there, and just helping them along the way is what I've found the most effective. Um, because oftentimes many organizations have folks that have a disability, right? It's one of the largest minoritized population, right? And you don't even know, because what we have disabilities that you can't see that are hidden, and oftentimes you don't even know you have folks in your organization with disabilities unless you make that call for action. Right?
Right.
You have to start there. You have to have that call for action. And oftentimes you'll have folks step up. And then that's when you are able to really kind of move that needle. Um, but taking it step by step.
Yeah, it's always a step by step. So,
Hmm.
have you heard of any organizations or anything on the trend about eco-friendly approaches to the diversity work, or whether it's technology or innovations? And so, there are some organizations that do have that environmental focus,
Hmm.
social governance, and ESG focus. What are some recommendations for those organizations that want an eco-friendly approach to their accessibility work?
I think that universal design principle, right? If you think about incorporating universal design principles in your environment that are usable and accessible to all, regardless of disability status, age, this approach aligns with sustainability,
Mm.
right? It emphasizes longevity and flexibility of use, reducing the need for future modifications. Is, within that case study, we're talking about how you future proof accessibility. Universal design is it. So I think really just really paying attention to that. There's also for organizations who are really into, technologies, there's energy efficiency within assistive technologies. So there are sustainable designs that focuses on energy efficiency. So when you're thinking about that in an accessible context, this can mean integrating different like smart technologies that can be used for with people with disabilities, such as those voice activated systems,
Wow.
that can definitely help. Green spaces is another area I would say. Accessible green spaces are really important and vital for mental and physical well-being, regardless if you have a disability or not. So, ensuring those green spaces are designed with accessibility in mind, I think also promotes some sustainability in those eco friendly environments too.
Wow, I never even thought about that. I just know that that was something that I've been reading about, and didn't know that that was something that was also really important to organizations who are doing this work as well. So,
Mhm.
really cool to hear that. So, Jen, we hear a lot about the passion that you have. What drove this? Like, was there something internal where you were like, you know what, I really want to be in this field? Because this is a very niche field. And
Mhm.
you don't see a lot of people say, hey, I really want to go work in disabilities.
Mhm.
And usually when they do, there's a story behind it.
It
So,
is.
Jen, what is your story? What is your journey? What is your why in this
Yeah.
work that you do with persons with disabilities?
Well, I think my why started very young with my brother being diagnosed with sickle cell anemia when he was very young,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
And so this was early 80s when this happened. And so the advancement of medicine and what was happening with sickle cell, the research just wasn't there. And so unfortunately, he did pass away from sickle cell, but it was always in my mind, right? Like, what can I do? Like I always wanted to find the cure for sickle cell, right? Um, and so life led me kind of in a different direction because I know that there was, supports that he may have been able to receive based on having sickle cell, which is a qualifying disability, by the way,
Mhm.
that he may have been able to receive that wasn't just readily there for him in that time, right? And so that really was the why. Like, if I could do anything to honor my brother, it would be to work in the field of disability because of what he went through. I also have a son who has something called Erlin syndrome, where it's how his brain perceives light, and how he processes information. And so that is close to home. I have to stay on him all the time about reading and making sure he has colored lenses so that his vision, and how the light reflects is processes and information. And so those, my brother and my son, how close can you get? And so that is the reason why I fell in love with the field of disability, because I have two really close family members that are impacted by it. And so how can I help be an advocate? How can I help be an ally? How can I help move this profession forward and move it, keep moving it, and for organizations, so that when my son grows up, right, he's in sixth grade, he goes to work, he'll be in an organization where everything is there for him. He doesn't need to ask for accommodations or anything. It's already designed for someone who has a brain like his, right? And so, and honoring my brother as well. He was a straight A student, regardless of having his disabilities. Pretty smart. Um, but just thinking about, what if, I was there? Like, what if the advancement where we are now today with disability and even medicine, like, what if, like, what would his life have been like? So that keeps me going, and that's my why. It's very personal to me. But when I work with different organizations and I work with my students, it just fills my cup, and it tells me, like, hey, this is what your purpose. This is why you're here. So
Wow.
yeah.
And I'm sure Ricky is so proud of you
Mhm.
and everything you're doing. And it was tough. I heard the stories, because we were young. We were
Yeah.
young during all of that, and you happened to see it. And so, again, I'm sure Ricky is so proud of you and the work you're doing, and that you're moving forward and all the things you're doing. So thank you for sharing that and being vulnerable in
Mhm.
that story and space with us. And I see Jamise, thank you for joining us. He says, thank you for sharing
Yeah, thank
as well.
you.
So thank you so much for that. So what are some things that you want organizations or individuals to take away from our conversation today? If they're like, hey, here's my top 3 things I really want people to know about accessibility, persons with disabilities, or the stigma, what would those
Mhm.
3 things be?
Yeah, I would definitely say education and awareness is one. So I am a big proponent of doing your own learning. So if anyone here today, or if you see it later, there's tons and tons of information out there about people with disabilities. I would say do your own learning, right? About this population, what's been impacted. I mean, I would read up on the disability rights movement, like that.
Mm,
It's huge. 504 sit-ins, what happened, just the historical piece of the disability movement and kind of where we are now. So I would say definitely do your own learning, your education and awareness around that. Um, Also for organizations, I'm going to push this future proofing part. What can you do to future proof your organization? Meaning, what are you going to do to be proactive, right? Accommodations, in my opinion, is very reactive, right? But you can definitely implement trainings, awareness that are proactive. There's different policies that you can put in place that are more proactive to support folks with disabilities. So I would definitely say that as well. And then look into the technology evolution, right? So those different advancements within technology and the outspace and the development of accessibility features, kind of learning how it impacts folks with disabilities, and ensuring that any technologies that you have in your organization, that the design has good accessible features. I would definitely say that. But the main thing for me is making sure that your environment is an environment in which folks with abilities feel safe, and they feel that they belong, right? Because if there's not a sense of belonging, if there's not a value added there, then um, you're not gonna get you're not going to move forward. You're not going to be able to future proof accessibility. So do the work that you need to do. Hire people that have disabilities. I would say look at your hiring practices. Um, Look at the asset and look at the value added for folks with disabilities. If you need people to come in and look at your policies, hire you some experts to come in. Um, but I think we're at a point now in society where we have to do this work. No group should be left behind. So that's what I would do.
Awesome. That's great. I mean, this is an area that I've seen myself and the work that I do that gets left behind a lot.
Mhm.
It's not spoken about. There's no work done. And in the diversity work, we see that there are certain areas of diversity that focus on more than others. But if you really want to take a holistic approach to diversity architecture, which is why this framework was created,
Mhm.
um, is to look at it from different angles. It's not just about race or gender. It's not just about one area. It's really about, like you said, policies, metrics, accessibilities, goals, change,
Mhm.
training for change, right?
Mhm.
So we don't want to just say, hey, I did a training. I know
Mhm.
about accessibility. Well, have you changed your policies? Have you
Mhm.
changed your mindset? Have you changed the website? What changes have you made from this trainings? And so I love to hear experts like yourself and other experts we're going to bring on for the diversity architecture to talk about this, because again, it's not siloed. I'm so tired of hearing the diversity is siloed. It's not
It's
a
not.
silo. It's
Mhm.
so many different areas. And Jen, you talked about it so beautifully. And I don't think I've heard anyone speak about disabilities the way that you do.
Mhm.
The passion you have about it, the ease of which you can implement this into your workplace.
Mhm.
It's just so amazing. So, how can people get in touch with you? Let's say, hey, they want to have you come speak, because you talk a lot about training and speaking now. If they want, if they're interested
Yeah.
in having you come do a keynote or something, how can they find you?
Yeah, so you can definitely contact me. I can give you my email address. It's Dr. Jen, so DrJennAlise, Dr. Jen Elise at gmail.com. You can also reach me by phone, 229-200-8364. Those are the best ways to reach me. You can also go through Lakeisha because she's definitely, I work really closely with her. And by the way, let me give it up for her in this diversity architecture, because this is like groundbreaking approach to the work that we do, and it's so needed. So I'm just amazed and in awe with all the things that you do. But I really appreciate what you're doing, especially with this work, because it's so needed. And what you said, disability has always been kind of left out of diversity,
Mhm.
which we're going to stop that now.
We
Lakeisha
are.
that now. And so we're really excited about it. And thank you for all the work that you're doing. And I'm so proud of you. I really am.
Thank you. I really appreciate it. And it's people like
Mhm.
yourself and Margie, DeBrew,
Yes. We
Angie
love
Carter,
Margie.
Tina, all
Yes.
the wonderful
Love you,
people.
Akina.
Yes, all these wonderful people on our team that make this
Mhm.
happen, that believe in this diversity architecture framework that I'm creating, that say, hey, we need to have more than just one area of diversity. So thank to all of you all. This is great. Thank you, Shanine. Awesome work. Thank you. That's our big cuz.
Yes.
Showing the little cuz some love. We really appreciate it as well. So speaking of big and little cuz, I like to ask some really like a cool question at the end about
Yes.
personal stuff. So someone has a milestone birthday coming up. Well, I do too.
Oh,
I do too, but so do you. So tell everybody what are you planning for your big birthday? I won't say which it is now. Jamise and Shanine know how old I'm turning, so we're gonna disregard those two. But nobody else knows, right? So we have big milestone birthdays coming
we
up. So
do.
what is it that you're planning for your big milestone birthday?
This big milestone for both of us is
Yeah.
is, is, is a thing. But we're planning. I'm going to Puerto Rico for my birthday, so we're gonna spend some days on the island of Puerto Rico for this big 40. I can't.
Yeah, we're about to be 40. We're gonna be 40. So cool. I turned 41st, of course. So I don't
5 months before me.
Yes, I was supposed to go to Nairobi, but that's not happening. So I gotta like regroup and plan something
We
else.
got to figure something out. We're
Yeah,
also
figure
going to do a
something out.
cousins trip too.
We should do a cousin's trip. I mean, we all
Yeah.
have passports, so let's make it happen. I am so excited. Thank you so much, Jen. This has been
Yeah.
such a joy, so much support we have here in the chat. Make sure you check out the Diversity Blueprint 2024 if you want to hear about this future proofing that Jen talked about. Or if you want to hear about any of the case studies, again, this is all about case studies. You want to hear the work that they've done. You want to hear the results. You heard Jen talk about ROI and results. Check it out. It's only $99 until March 22nd, which, by the way, is my sister's birthday. So, and then the price goes up to $199. So make sure you check it out. Learn about diversity architect and hear from 8 amazing experts in this field. Until next time, thank you all so much for joining us for the Leadership Loft. I am your host, Lakeisha C. Brooks, with my amazing, wonderful guest today, Dr. Jennifer Mitchell. Bye, guys.
Bye.